Father's Day, great men. I celebrate you. My Vision is Clear Experiences honors and affirms you for all you do. Okay, I have one question for you guys. If you could have one gift for Father's Day, what would it be? Well, today is Father's Day, and I want to talk with a father that is not only my friend, but a father that had a vision for fatherhood and an experience that not many men talk about loss. Tsombawi Knibye Jr., the author of the book Letting Go of Baby 2, discusses his journey of understanding fatherhood from being a son to finally becoming a father. Welcome to My Vision's Clear Experiences in Bowie. I am so glad you are here. How are you
I
doing?
am glad. I am glad to be here. I'm glad this is my second time around, and I'm looking forward to it. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and to have conversation and to keep things moving as we do.
Yes, indeed. And yes, as you stated, this is your second time. And I felt like, this is fitting because this is a special episode and this speaks to who you are, what you're doing, and what you're going to continue to do. And I felt like who else but my brothers in Bowie to speak on this topic of fatherhood and just your vision behind that and what has come from your experience of being fathered and being a father. So thank you again for doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well.
So let's jump on in, brother.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I've known you for a while, but I'd have to say I met you at a time when you were grown, in college, and so there's a lot that was before, the Zimbabwe I met in school. And so I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you're from and what tools you were given as a young man.
Well, I'm originally from Trenton, New Jersey. Most people who are from Jersey, normally I say I'm from Jersey. If anyone says from New Jersey, it's like, no, you moved to New Jersey. When you live and you're from New Jersey, you say I'm from Jersey. That's what
Right.
So I'm originally from Jersey, Trenton,
That's
that
right.
is, and born and raised. And
Yeah.
my background is a lot of church background for me, from as far back as I can remember up until present day. And my parents were both in the house, mother and father. Father worked a lot, particularly when we moved from Jersey for a while and we moved back. And when we moved back the second time, he was a truck driver, and so he was gone a lot. So my mother was home with me, my younger brother. I have an older brother who was still living in Ohio at the time where we had moved to and moved back to. And so grew up in a rough neighborhood, probably one of the roughest neighborhoods in Trenton, West Trenton. The interesting thing was we lived on what was called Church Street, but and there was a church that was on the corner of one of the main streets, and next to that church, one street over, was a liquor store.
Oh.
And a lot of activity on the weekends happened on that corner and on our street. And but it helped groom me into who I am today, to be, aware and to be watchful and to kind of have an eye for when things look a little odd or things may look a little, disinteresting. And so my upbringing with my father, I never had to ask my father certain questions when I started getting of age to certain places. So when I went from being, elementary school to middle school to high school, he kind of always knew when it was time to have a talk about something. Now, of course, I did ask him questions, but he just kind of knew when it was time, and then it allowed me to ask more questions as our conversations unfolded. And so I get my work ethic from him, as well as my mindset, which is to, number one, as a man, you're a provider for your family. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, you always come last, meaning your family is put first, but your personal needs always come last.
Mm-hmm.
Not to put them aside, but they come last in
And
certain
this
phases.
phases. Is this is something that you saw growing up, not just something he spoke about,
Oh
right?
yeah, definitely, definitely. He would. It was always an understanding for me. My mother would always tell us, "Your father is doing this because." So there
Mm,
was an understanding of why he was doing what he was doing, why he was away so long. So there was no, well, where's daddy at? And there was no answers. It
right.
was always an answer, always a why behind what he was doing. So I took that into my family when I eventually started one, and that helped groom me to be who I am today, to be the man, the father that I am, and
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing currently today as being
Mm-hmm.
a mentor or a coach to some parents, and
Mm-hmm.
also being a youth mentor. So
So talk to me a little bit about the relationship of a father and his sons. Now you are raised with all boys, is that correct?
yes, all boy. I'm the middle child. I have an older brother and younger brother.
And a younger brother. So you got your parents raising three boys in the streets of Trenton, Jersey, and your father was providing, and your mom was, I would assume, home and maybe even working as well. At the end of the day, they created a stable home environment. But you mentioned that your father was gone a lot. So how did you build a relationship with your dad? And was it a relationship that was like something you had hoped for, or you just like, this is what it is with what I can get it when he's here. So we're just going to develop this with what we have.
No,
Give me a.
our relationship was very, very tight. Even though he was gone a lot, my father would come home, months on end after being on the road traveling as a truck driver, and he would bring the truck home sometimes and give us rides in the truck when he came
Mhm.
home. So that
Yes.
was a cool thing. But also he would come home. He might bring a little something home, maybe a gift or two that he would have for us. Nothing big, nothing huge. Just a hey, I'm home. I'm thinking about you. I brought you something.
Mhm.
And so for me, that was enough for me because I looked up to my father, and I
Mhm.
still do. At 80 plus years old, I still look
Wow.
up to my father. He is my hero. He is my mentor in front of anyone else that I've ever met in my life. And so I always wanted to some way somehow be like him, but I also wanted to make him proud because I
Mhm.
knew how hard he worked to do what
Right.
he did and provide for us. So our relationship was never, oh, he's not here. How do I build it, or how do I go about doing it? How do I feel about it? Just in
Mhm.
different phases of my life, when I got into junior high school or middle school, as they call it now, uh,
Mhm.
my mother took on a job because then me and my brother were able to be home by ourselves for a certain amount of hours without a
Right.
parent being there. So she took on a job. And so we were home by ourselves most times in the afternoons until she got home. And when I got to high school, I was playing basketball more. So I was on the basketball team. And my father wasn't driving truck anymore. He then transitioned to driving city buses for the city of Trenton, and
Okay.
his hours will always fluctuate. So in my high school years, my father might have made 5 of my games in high school in totality. But I
Mhm.
never resented it because I knew what he was doing for the family. So,
Mhm.
but when he showed up, I showed out because I knew he was there.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm like, I don't know when the next game he's gonna be at, so I'm gonna make sure I give him a show because he's here today. And
Yeah.
so I appreciated that because he made the effort to be there at things when he was there, and that's what resonated with me and my children. I make the effort to be there as much as I can when I can, and they come first no matter what. Unless there's just something beyond my control or something I have to do,
Mhm.
they come first. So
And what I love about your story and what you're saying is that even at a young age, you understood that your father didn't love you any less, and that even if there was some disappointment as a child, that he wasn't at all of your games, that you understood what the overall goal was, and that it didn't really affect your relationship, or did it? Maybe you had needed some understanding at that age, maybe from your mom, or maybe even speaking with your dad. How is it that you were able to really, like, kind of navigate through the feelings of a young man who does not see his father at the games all the time, but do remember the times that he was there, while still understanding why he wasn't there, to really say to yourself, okay, this does not reflect on me. I just know he has to do this. This is not going to hurt our relationship. I understand this. How were you able to navigate through that at such a young age?
Well, that was definitely through my mother. She was always making sure we understood why he was doing what he was doing, and then doing her best to help, lead and guide us as boys who were coming into, into teenage years of, what to do, what not to do. But understand this: my father might have been away a lot during his truck driving days, but he
Mm-hmm.
did call home. It was like he was just never there. Like, he called home, and there would be times we'd talk to him on the phone. Hey, how you doing? As we got older, the conversations would change, and so he was always checking on us. And the thing that we know that a lot of this generation may not know or understand is, if you happen to act up and your mother decides she's gonna do something about it, the next thing she says is, "I'm gonna tell your daddy when he get home."
Yes. Still
And
that authority.
that was me saying, I don't want to have to deal with him when he gets home, whatever that is. Because
Mm-hmm.
one thing my father didn't do is he didn't forget.
Mm.
He did
All
not
right.
forget.
All right.
And there was a story, and I'm not going to tell the whole story because it's not mine, it's my brother's story. But
Mm-hmm.
he was something he had done consistently. Nothing that was bad. It's just it had to do with TV, watching a lot of TV.
Mm-hmm.
And my
Mm-hmm.
father had been home, and one of the issues he had was the TV was a distraction. So
Mm.
my father asked him to do something, and he took his time doing it, meaning that he was still in front of the TV. And I heard my father, he walked by, he was still sitting there, and he raised his voice and said it in a way I never heard before.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, that's what he needed. He needed my father to tell him,
Mm.
this is enough. Go do
Mm-hmm.
what I told you to do, and this better not ever happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And it never did.
I'm sure it didn't. I
So,
mean, I love that you make that point though, because there is a difference. There's a difference, just speaking as a mom, who has two boys. When I want my kids to do something, it's more than once. It's more than twice. Sometimes three times. And I'm like, but if my husband says the thing, it is something in the voice and just the presence that they feel immediately, and they're just like, let me get up and do this right now.
yeah.
And I just think that that is a necessary thing to have in the home. um, and if you're blessed to have that, you know what I mean, then I think it's something that should be utilized. So I love that you made that point, because the presence of fathers is just necessary, right? Whether it's in the home or not in the home. And in your case, it was in your home. But even when he wasn't there, his authority, you guys know what the deal was established, right?
Very much so.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And to this day, like, that respect is still there because it was instilled in us as young children. So that respect is still there. My children still see me give my father the same respect I gave him when I was younger, because I want to resonate with my children. This is how I treated my father, and I still treat him, which is what I expect you to do towards me. Not to
yeah.
be fearful of me,
Mm-hmm.
and a respect in that manner, but a respectful way, as though, it's this is the way life goes. And
Right.
when you honor your parents, you have long life on earth in this life. That's what the word tells us. Those of you who are believers, that's what the word says.
Uh-huh. Well, amen. Amen. Yes, it's true. That is what the word says. And so tell me about how your father incorporated, or I should say your relationship, how he incorporated the spiritual component and all of the different components to being a man, being the father that you are today. What were some of those major core values that you were raised with, that your father put in you, that he had, that you feel like it made you who you are today?
Well, one of those things is being a hard worker.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say being a hard worker, it's being consistent, it's being on time, it's being reliable, and knowing that whatever job or task you have, you need to number one complete it, and make sure you don't shortcut anything. Make sure you do the job the way it's supposed to be done. If you
Mm-hmm.
have a better idea, let it be known. If you're not the one in charge, ask somebody. Don't just go do your own thing. Ask
Right.
somebody.
Right.
And then the one other thing, and there's plenty of them, but the two that stick out to me is that, and then my father taught me that it's okay for a man to be emotional or sensitive. And when I
Mm-hmm.
say that, because it's something that I take with me all the time, because with men, like, we struggle with that emotional sensitivity area, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can't show that, like that's a sign of weakness. It's like, no, like, the feelings that we have as human beings, whether you're a woman or a man, are the feelings we were given by the creator. Like, he gave those to us to use
Right.
them. Now there is some thin lines of how often you use those feelings, but
Mm-hmm.
he taught me that you can cry, and you can have emotions and feelings, and you can, be sensitive about something. He said, at the same time, you also need to be strong, be courageous, and not be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
There's a balance to it. And so he taught me how to balance those feelings and emotions, and being sensitive to things, being able to uh, be manly, at the same time show my emotions in a way that if someone were to scrutinize or to criticize it, I never felt any certain way about it, because my father taught me how to utilize those things.
Mm-hmm. And that's excellent. I just love the tools and the gems that he has put into you, and the whole point of emoting, right? Using your emotions. I mean, we are all given those things. That's something that God gave us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as much as we want to suppress them, they are a part of us. It helps us to be and grow, and so to be told and encouraged to be able to use your emotions and express your emotions as a man, right? In a world where you're told you should not, and it's weakness and all this extra stuff. And I just love that that was the opposite, because you can use your emotions and not be seen as weak, right? And so I
Exactly.
love that. So now
Exactly.
you are a grown man,
Grown
okay?
man.
Grown man with a whole wife and a whole family. And now you have to raise your kids. And so, what was your thought? What was your vision when you and your wife decided you were going to have children? What were your thoughts on how you saw that panning out as far as what you've experienced and what you wanted to give to your children?
Well, that's an interesting question, because me and my wife, we grew up differently. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. She grew up in the suburbs.
Okay.
So there was not that there was necessarily clashing, but for me, there was always an awareness. You always got to
Mm,
be aware. You got to understand your surroundings, where you are. No matter how nice a place you live at, you gotta have your antennas up. You never know. She
yes.
she was not loose, just that it was just a different. It wasn't always everything was kind of like, oh, it's not that serious. It's
Mm,
okay. And so when it came to the children, um, we're both disciplinarians, but one of us may not be as uh, hard on a particular disciplinarian way than the other. And
mm,
so one thing we did say that we are going to raise our children the way we were raised.
Okay.
Whether that includes, taking something away from you, whether that includes putting something on you behind, whatever that includes,
Right.
but we also said that we wanted to make sure that we raised children that were righteous and that knew, the way of the Creator. And so our main thing, we wanted to have children very early in our marriage.
Mm.
We kind of like, take a year ish, and then we'll kind of start going that way. And we actually um, started, I think maybe a year or so after, because we were planning on moving into our actual house that we owned because we first rented it, and then we moved. I think I believe, and don't quote me on this, she was pregnant or or she got pregnant when we moved into our last house,
Okay.
and so we wanted to have them early, and so we weren't messing around, and we're like, look, we're not trying to keep up with the Joneses and do what everybody else did. It's like, this is our marriage. We're going to do as we decide to do. No disrespect to anybody else,
Right.
including our
Right.
parents. It was like we had talked about everything before we got
Yeah.
married, and we knew that we wanted to have children early, and so just establishing those foundational things and using what our parents gave us, eating the meat, spitting out the bone, kind of thing.
Right.
But the majority of that foundation we kept for our children. So
Hmm. And so you've used, and that's interesting because you're saying that you come from two totally different backgrounds, but somehow your core values seem to have been the same, right?
mm-hmm.
And so tell me how helpful that was in being able to establish yourself. And when I say establish yourself, obviously you're the kid's father, but your presence, your relationship, your own type of relationship with your kids. How was that talked about? Was it talked about? Or was that just an unspoken understanding between you and your wife?
We have conversations, about that even now. But when they were born, we everything we had talked about, we're like, all right, they're here now. This is kind of how we're going to do things. And so, we have a boy and a girl. My son came first, daughter came later. And so I being that I was from a rough area, I'm always on, not always, but I've calmed down from time to forward, but I'm always like on alert. I'm always looking, I'm experiencing the environment, see what's going on. I'm
Right,
very
right.
protective of my family.
Yes.
Not like I'm walking around with, AK-47s, you know what I mean? But, but I have, there is a cubby hole when we're out at the grocery store, at the mall, going to the restaurant, wherever we are. There's always a cubby hole. I'm like, these are the rules of us. The children always stand on the inside of us. They don't stand near the curb where the cars ride. We go in the parking lot. They stand on the inside of us. That there's rules that I abide by to
Yeah.
keep them safe, as
Hmm.
well as my wife. And so my wife, being married to her, it taught me how to treat a girl,
Mm.
because I had to be a little more sensitive to her and her feelings because she wasn't a boy, she wasn't a man. So it
Mm.
taught me how to be a little more sensitive to my daughter. My son, I could be a little more harsh with because he's a boy. I can do that. But my
Mm.
son also has my wife's temperament. So I have to be careful there as well. My wife is very calm. She's laid back to a degree. And so I had to make sure that I didn't do things to make him feel as though I didn't love him.
Mm.
And so I had
Yeah.
to be careful. Now that he's 12 years old and in middle school, he's now beginning to change in ways I can be a little more harsh, and I can start having conversations with him about, hey, now you got to start being a little more responsible. I'm going to be a little harder on you now because now you have to take on a little more responsibility. And so I
Mm.
had to learn how to deal with the feelings and the sensitivities of both my son and my daughter, because my daughter's more like me, my son's more like my wife. So,
Mm.
but I can't treat my daughter like my son because she's more like me. She's still
Right.
a girl. And my son,
Mm.
who was a boy, has my wife's temperament. So I had to learn how to be able to, how to handle certain things with him without making him feel that doesn't love me because he did this or said this way.
Right. And I'm sure that took some navigating because you were raised in a household with all boys. So I would
Right.
assume that your father and maybe even your mom, there was just a certain way of they communicated with you that was pretty much across the board, right? Because you're
Mm.
dealing with all boys, and
Yeah.
so you had your first child, and it was a boy, and so were you initially thinking that way of raising your son as how you were raised in that temperament environment? Is that what first came across?
I was because he was a boy,
Mm-hmm.
and as he started to unravel into his childhood, I realized that he's not like me in temperament. He's like her. So I had
Mm-hmm.
to kind of flip the script and be like, okay, I got to change these few things here. This here can stay. This can
Yeah.
stay. But I got
Mm-hmm.
to change these over here because he's not like me in temperament or in
Yeah.
attitude. So I had to really move some things around because you know, it wasn't, the boy in the hood kind of thing, you know.
Right.
So, but that
Yeah.
was interesting to me because it allowed me, because I deal with youth now, a lot. It allowed me to see both sides of the track and how to navigate to help youth, whether you live in the suburbs, you live in a rough area, you live
Yeah.
in a rural area, you live wherever you live at, you live on a farm, whatever. Like I can deal with you because I've lived on a farm, I've lived in the suburbs, I've lived in the hood, I've lived in urban areas. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have a multicultural background of living in different areas. But
Mm-hmm.
having my son allowed me to kind of move those things along, be able to teach others along the way.
Yeah. So if there was something that you had to say that while your upbringing um, seemed to have been great for you, I'm sure not everything is perfect, right? Because there's no such thing. And you made into your point of you and your wife doing your thing, regardless of opinions of family and all these different things. If there had to be one or two things that you knew you were not going to do with your kids, what was that?
Well, I'll say this for me personally. I know for me, I wasn't going to be that parent that was always, you got to work harder. You got to work harder. You got to train harder. You got to train harder. You got to do more harder. It's like, yeah, you got to do better and do harder. But there's phases of life where now my son's in middle school, like, okay, we got to step our game up. Elementary
Mm-hmm.
school was like, all right, yes, I understand. I get it. I'm like, but, I'm not going to crack the whip on every single solitary thing.
Yeah.
Now you're in middle school. I'm like, okay, now we're gonna step it up a little bit. I'm gonna be a little harder on you now. And now he understands that. And so it was, for me, it wasn't gonna be the parent that if he's playing sports, I'm out there yelling and screaming because he's not doing the right thing. I'm like, no, I'm like, that's not gonna help him per se. I could
Mm,
talk to him about that when it's over, but I'm
right.
not gonna be that parent out there. What are you doing? I'm like, no, that's not gonna be me. I'm not gonna be that
Right.
parent.
Yeah.
My father was the same way with me. He would talk to me after games. If he saw
Mm,
things happen, he was like, well, why didn't you do that? Or why did you do this? He would
mm,
never do it during the game and yell and quote unquote embarrass me. So
mm,
I took that again from my father, said, I'm gonna do it after the game, but I'm gonna do it constructively, not destructively. And
mm.
so for my wife, there's a slight difference, but that's what helps keep both of us balanced. And there's times where I might do what she does, and times she does
Mm.
what I do.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. And that's the beauty of having the right partner for raising kids, right? And
exactly.
so you and your wife have been parenting and doing this thing for a while, right? Had your own experiences with being a young black male in the hood of Trenton, and having
T-Town.
to navigate that. You know what I'm saying? And then you had those values. You have now have your kids, and so now you feel like I think I can share these experiences with other people, right? And so you decided that you're going to write a book called Letting Go of Baby 2. And so I
Yes.
would love to get a little bit more information on what made you decide you want to do this.
Well, first of all, I will say this is that the book itself was actually it's long overdue. I
Mm.
kind of not procrastinated, just life happened, and
Right.
then I continued to let life happen and not do what I was needed to do. But I
Mm.
think the timing is still perfect because everything is great in Elohim's time. But my wife initially wrote the first book, Letting Go of Baby.
Okay.
And our first pregnancy, we lost the first child.
Mm.
And so, and in all technicality, we actually lost more than one, but that was the one that started it. And
Mm.
so, what happened was she was journaling um, her journey pretty much, and
Yeah.
turned the journal into a book. And she never saw that happening. It just kind of happened. And so she wrote the book out of this journal and published it, and she put it out. And then her and her friend, who was a counselor, they wrote the follow up. What next? How a book about grief and the stages of grief when
Mm.
going through that. And so I saw how it affected the women that read the book, and they did a seminar in New York where women came out and they experienced this, and some of the women she's still connected with today from that. And I saw how it helped women who read her book, went through the experience, went through the grief. And I had no plans to write a book like this. And I was like, man, I said, what if I wrote this book from the male perspective? I'm like, because when it comes to baby loss or even child loss to a degree, it's like you never really hear the man's side of it happening. It's always from the female.
Mm.
And we go back to that sensitivity and emotion thing. Like, we just don't talk about stuff like that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we've been taught, like, no, you got to keep it in. You got to deal with it in here. But the
Mm.
thing is that as men, the more we keep things in and suppress it, it's going to come out in other ways
Right.
because we never dealt with that one thing that really changed our lives for the
Mhm.
worse to a
Yeah.
degree, or even for the better.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this book to help other men who have gone through this
Mm.
to heal, and to not to have to deal with the shame or being bitter, or even having to deal with the grief that they suppressed for so long that you don't really realize why you're lashing out or why you have an issue with this, because you haven't dealt with that issue of losing that child. That you, as men, we're protectors, so we want to protect our wives
Yeah.
from the hurt and from all that. And so that's why I wrote the book. And there's some stuff in here that um, people who know me don't really know what I was
Mhm.
dealing with at the time when it happened, including yourself. So you'll get some surprises in this book as well.
Yes. Yes, I'm sure I will.
And,
I'm
but
sure.
that's why I wrote it. It was to help other
Yeah.
men. And then and as I even wrote it, I could feel myself going back to those moments and saying, wow, I never really knew I felt like that. I never
Mm.
knew I thought like that. And so I
Yeah.
started putting it down on paper.
Mm. I love that because men have their own experiences as well.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a very traumatic experience for a woman who has the life in her body and then is no longer alive, and have to do all the things with that. But men have their experience as well, and I love that you are bringing that to the forefront because it really does give men the permission to be able to say, you know what, I will be there for my partner, but I also need some support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm navigating through this as well. And so I absolutely love the openness of that because it's necessary. I mean, let's, get rid of this stigma of guys not being able to be real with their feelings and be present with their feelings and just allow themselves to just get in there and feel that thing, because it is a painful, traumatic experience.
It is, and we tend to forget that not only did you know the woman lose a child, but the man did too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not to downplay or negate the fact that
Right.
the woman who carried the child lost
Of
it, but
course.
there's a union that happens as a mother and father. You're together, you're one. When one's hurting, one needs to be strong, and vice versa. And
Mm.
so, and that's kind of how I felt with my wife. I'm like, I need to be strong for her. But then when
Right.
it was all said and done, I'm like, okay, who's going to be strong for me? you
Where's
know
my refuge?
Right, and
Yeah.
not that she can't, but that she
Right.
has her own
She's
thing to
still,
deal with.
yeah, she's dealing with her stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's tough. That is tough to be able to try to be there support for each other, but really don't know how to do that because you're really dealing with your own stuff. So, as a father who has gone through that, um, what has that done to you when you had your kid? You finally had your child. What did that do for you? I'm sure you're just adding what you've already experienced, but this is a new experience, right? To add on top of what you've already had. And so that has then pushed you into being a father that is what?
The father that is grateful,
Hmm.
plain and simple. I mean, when my son was finally born, everything that led up to that, I dealt with a lot of negative thoughts towards myself because why is this happening? What's going on? And then for it to happen, you as a man, you're like, well, you start to feel inadequate. Well, do I deserve to have children? Do I deserve to be a father? Am I really a good husband? You start asking questions, and then you start casting blame, and the blame goes on you because we're the head. And so
Right.
when things go wrong, we're looked at as like, well, we're the head of the household. It's like, what needs to happen? Things go right, you get praise, and that's great. But we're built on conquering. We're built to accomplish. And when failure or stumbles in life happen, first thing we do is we ask questions. Why? And we're trying to
Yeah.
figure it out, trying to fix it. And when you can't fix it, that's a whole nother thing that goes. Now your mind is starting to start giving you things to say about yourself. And with one thing with me, the reason why I started my company Frame of Mind Inc. is because I dealt with negative thoughts, and those
Mm-hmm.
thoughts became words that I said, and those words that I said started shaping my world. And I had to change my mindset because once my wife got pregnant again, it's like, okay, is this going to happen again? Like, are we going to lose this one too? It's like, no, you gotta flip the script. It's easier said than done. But for me, it was grateful because it finally happened.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I didn't mind whether it was a boy or girl, whether
Mm-hmm.
just as long as it was healthy and all that great stuff. But
Yeah.
100% sure, I did want a boy first. I'm just
The truth will set you free. Yes.
The truth will set you free. And we didn't have all that gender reveal stuff. We were like, no, we want to know so we can know exactly what to get
Yeah.
so we have no surprises. So,
Yes. I hear that. I love it. You are just really dropping a lot of gems and knowledge. And so, what would you like the fathers out there to learn from your experience that you've shared here today?
I would really like the fathers out there just to experience just freedom
Mm.
of 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 the emotions and feelings you dealt with when this happened. Because again, as men, a majority of us we're taught to suppress, keep it in, deal with it. And unless you have someone in your life, whether it's your father or an uncle or just someone who was older, to kind of lead you and guide you in life, giving you the right things to do,
Yeah.
you kind of navigate through life by what you see, what you hear, what your surroundings are. And until you're taught of a better way to do it, not necessarily the worst or bad way, but a better way to do it, you're going to continue to do the thing that you know to do or what you were taught to do. And my thing is that men would begin to experience, healing, and restoration, and begin to just let go of baby too. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Because your wife eventually has to let go, and
mm,
eventually you do too. And a lot of men technically haven't let go either. It's still something that plagues their mind, in the back of their head, if they have never dealt with it or never talked about it.
yeah.
Because women, they establish groups around this stuff. They have seminars and all that stuff, and we just like, oh well, that's not for us. Why
Mm,
isn't it for us? Like, we're human beings. Like, we hurt too.
yeah.
We hurt too. So my thing is that men would heal and just begin to immerse themselves in just becoming uh to a degree delivered from that experience. Not
Mm,
necessarily that you forget, but that you
right.
forgive yourself and don't blame yourself for what
Mm,
happened, and continue to move on.
I love it. Tell the people how they can get in touch with you, how they can get this much needed book. And not just for men, but for women as well. We can learn how to support our men when they are going through, right? So tell the
Yeah.
people, show the book, let us know how do they get in touch with you?
So this is like the sample version. Like, my actual books are coming in, but this is Letting Go of Baby 2, From a
Okay.
Father's Heart by Tsombawi Knibye Jr. You can get it on my website, tsombawi.com. That's TSOMBAWI.com. And you can pre-order the book from there as well. The Kindle version will not be available until July 14th. That's the release date. But you can pre-order the book now, and then get your book, when the pre-order gets done, right from that website. And then on top of that too, there's also a series. So we have a series as well on the website, where you
Mm-hmm.
can get my wife's book, the book on grief, and Letting Go of Baby as well, for a three book series for husband and wives to read together, or groups to do together, any of that nature. I would highly encourage any women out there to read Letting Go of Baby 2. It will give you a good insight to how your husband felt during
Mm-hmm.
that time. If you felt alone, or you felt like he really didn't connect with you, like, this book will help you understand that. And I would
Mm,
highly encourage men to read my wife's book to understand the real deep wounds that women have when this happens. So, but that's, you can get it from. You can also contact me on any of my social media handles, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. It's just my name, or I'll give you the ad. It's that TK Billionaire. On
mhm.
Instagram, it's just TK.billionaire. No, I'm not a billionaire, but I am speaking billionaire into my
That's
life.
right.
Shata. Anyway. And on LinkedIn too. You can get me on LinkedIn. You can just type my name in. Anyone who gets the book, you can type my name in there. You find me on social media. Just type my name. My name is very different and unique. You can see it here, written down here in that very lovely font that
Yeah, yes.
Miss Adoua has put down there. So,
Yes. Yes.
but yes, that's where they can get it from. So,
All right. Well, y'all heard it. Keep in touch with us, Bowie. I call him
yes,
Bowie, but it is Zimbabwe.
yes,
Stay connected with him and all the things that he is doing, his wife is doing. As you can see, it is a wonderful and beautiful, I call it ministry, because it really is ministering to the hearts of our fathers and our mothers and just family. And so, thank you for being so transparent and for speaking on behalf of the fathers who are out there doing the thing, right? And just being the great role models and the necessary component in their children's lives, and then raising your children to be able to continue that legacy going forward. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for being a great father, a great husband, and being an inspiration for all of us out here. I affirm you.
thank you, Elaine, and thank you for having me again on the My Business Clear experience. It has been a pleasure, and always good to see you. Always good to see you.
What an awesome interview. It was so insightful to hear the perspective from a father who has suffered from loss and then became a father, and to see how he was influenced by his dad to pour into his children. I love what we saw today. I love what we heard today, and I hope that you were blessed by it and felt like you weren't alone. What else am I saying?
So going through it. I want you to still enjoy it.
So while Father's Day is still going on, make sure
5, 4, 3, 2.
it is still Father's Day. So make sure, dads, that you go out there and you enjoy yourself. Do whatever it is that you need to do for your day because you deserve it. But before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this interview with everyone you know because this is great information, right? Until next time, have a great one.